Mercury, the smallest and innermost planet, located closest to our Sun. Yet everybody say Mercury is the planet of paradoxes and extremes. Let's talk about that planet, what we know so far about its size, rotation, geology, surface. From recent studies, let's explore why this planet is so hard to study and what future may be for that planet. For a long time people knew that this planet is very small and is located the closest to the Sun. Already as far as in Sumerian times, people knew about its existence. It was almost 5,000 years ago. However, at that time it was assumed there was two different planets, one rising in the morning and one setting in the evening. Later on, the Greeks knew about that planet, and they knew that it's one planet that rotates around the Sun. If you only imagine, for a long time after that, the Western civilization was denying that our own planet Earth rotating around the Sun. In the modern science, the first explorer Galileo already observed the Mercury in his telescopes. It was always too hard to see much on its surface and assume its properties from that. Today we know much more. Two explorer spacecraft visited Mercury so far, and there's one on the way who's going this day right now, traveling closer to the Mercury so it can fly by around it and send us more information about this tiny but very hot planet. So the first spacecraft that studied Mercury, it was long time ago, in 1974. It was a Mariner 10. It was the last spacecraft in Mariner series who studied the planets in our solar system. However, why it's so hard to study Mercury? Mercury located so close to the Sun, so if you send any spacecraft to the Mercury, the sun pull is so strong, so it will disturb the orbit of this tiny little spacecraft, and the spacecraft will be destroyed. Therefore, Mariner 10 traveled towards the Mercury, fly around, have sent us several photographs, and have very sparse information about its surface, geology, or any other properties. Since then, Messenger traveled towards the Mercury. Messengers give us most of the information we know right now about Mercury. Scientists elaborate the trajectory of the Messenger, so the Messenger has to first rotate around the Earth to slow down its speed, so it can go then towards the Venus. Then it rotates around the Venus a couple times, and using the gravity pull of the Venus, it could come to the orbit of Mercury. When the Messenger exhausted all the fuel it has on its board, it just crashed into the Mercury. Recently, scientists of Europe and Japan decided to send another explorer to the Mercury, which can land on its surface and give us more information, similar like we have information right now from the Mars surface. However, it's become so expensive project, they have to decline this idea. Nevertheless, in 2018, they sent the spacecraft to the Mercury without landing on its surface, but just flying around it and study its magnetosphere and surface by photographing and probing it from above. So you can see it's quite hard to study Mercury in comparison than other planets, because of its proximity to the Sun and very small size. But what we know about the Mercury so far? As I told you, it's a very small planet. There's even 2 satellite moons. In our solar system exist satellite moons. It's the satellites like our moon for the Earth, for other planets, which are bigger than Mercury. So the Mercury is the separate planet, it's not satellite, but there's a satellite that's bigger than Mercury. However, the moon is almost similar by the size and appearance to the Mercury. It's a little bit smaller, about 1,000 kilometers in diameter. Therefore, the diameter of the Mercury is only 4,880 kilometers, and it's about 38% of our Earth's diameter. You can understand the surface area of the Mercury quite small. It's only 75 million square kilometers. It's about 10% of the surface area of our planet. So we can fit only 2 sides of the Asia continent on the whole surface of the Mercury. Therefore, by the size, you can fit 18 Mercury planets within our Earth planet, if you want to compare the sizes. However, it's the next most dense planet in our solar system after Earth, due to its very high iron content. If you look through the insides of the Mercury, it looks like majority of it is the core, which is still active, in radius about 1.8 thousand kilometers, and it consists mostly of iron. Then they have a thin layer of mantle, about 600 kilometers, composed of a lot of silicate material, and very thin crust, just from 100 till 300 kilometers. This crust is solidified before the core, and geologists who study the planet's surfaces could see the evidence that there was a crust which cooled down much faster, creating ripples on its surface, and even maybe features that showing us that the planet a little bit shrinked. While we're talking about the core, let's find out, is the Mercury have a magnetic field? It's very weak, it's only 1% intensity of our Earth's magnetic field. Therefore, as I told before in previous videos about the Mars and atmospheres of the planets, you can understand it will be hard for us to survive on that surface. Overall, the whole planet of the Mercury is about 30% silicate materials and 70% of iron. That's why it's so dense, small but yet very dense. The majority of its gravity is due to this heavy iron core, rather than in our Earth we have a good gravitational pull due to the size of the planet as well. Therefore, Mercury is the planet in our solar system which doesn't have any satellites. Probably there will be any, they will be stripped away by a very active sun, or be pulled away by the sun. Recent messenger evidence suggested that Mercury always have a thinner mantle and crust, because of the big drag of the sun located next to it. The theory was supported by messenger high level of materials like potassium on its surface. If originally the Mercury had more mantle on the surface and atmosphere, and due to the sun it will lose it, one day the materials like potassium will not survive on the surface. But as they say, there is very weak magnetosphere which protect a little bit Mercury's surface from solar wind, and only recently scientists could see how the particles coming from the sun are deflected by the magnetic field of Mercury. However, it's very weak, and Mercury have very big tail of the material behind it, which is stripping constantly away wherever atoms are there present on its surface. At the same time, Mercury is always subjected to meteoroids' wind. It's a very tiny pieces of meteors which less than 1 gram in weight, but they constantly bombarding the poor Mercury atmosphere. Therefore, you can imagine all these properties and the location of the Mercury to the Sun, and the fact that it doesn't have much tilt axis like our Earth. It's only 2 degrees rather than 23.5 like on our Earth. The Mercury is constantly showing one side towards the Sun and other sides towards the cold space. And there's no atmosphere, it's very small, there's no strong magnetic field at all, and it's ended up with extreme condition on the surface. Thus, there's no seasons on the Mercury at all, there's no atmosphere to retain any heat collected, and it rotates only once every 58.6 days around itself, and it revolves around the Sun every 88 days. It's very odd, it's very hard for us to comprehend when our planet rotates 365-66 also days around the Sun in a year. Mercury rotating 1.5 times for every trip around the Sun. It's mean the day on the Mercury is twice as long as the year. Can you imagine that? And also there's another factor we should talk about. It's the orbit of the Mercury. It's very odd because it's located so close to the Sun. It's very affected by its pull, and it's most eccentric than any other orbit. It's mean it's the least closest to the circle, perfect circle, than any other orbits in our solar system. It's very elongated. And when the Mercury in the part of perihelion, the closest point to the Sun, it's that moves much faster. So the Mercury is kind of speed up by the proximity to the Sun. And when you're standing on the surface of Mercury, if it's possible ever, you will look in the sky. It would appear that the Sun moving west in the sky, but then stopped when you're getting closer towards the Sun in the middle of the year, and then start moving very slowly and even backwards for a few days. Then as Mercury moved past the Sun towards aphelion, away to the more distant part, its speed slowing down, and the Sun will start moving westwards back again. At the same time, the stars on the sky will look like moving much faster than the Sun. But also scientists say that the orbit of the Mercury is very chaotic, it constantly fluctuates. Some scientists suggested that even many millions years away from now, Mercury can collide with Venus. That's how it's affected by pull from the planets and our Sun. Therefore, we have very extreme condition temperature-wise on the surface. Part of the Mercury that facing the Sun can reach as much as 427 degrees Celsius. Everything will be just burned there on the surface and stay for some time. Remember, I told you it's revolved around itself more than the Mercury year. At the same time, the darker shaded part can reach the temperature below 183 degrees Celsius. The moment it's rotated back to the Sun, it's heat up very fast. There's no protection, there's no atmosphere for the surface. Scientists showing that there's a lot of impact craters on the surface of the Mercury. We'll also have some evidence of volcanic activity, some lava flows, similar like we see on the Moon. See my video about the Moon. We'll talk a little bit about geology and the forms, features you can see on the Moon. As any other planet, through the history of our solar system, Mercury was exposed to the bombarding times. There was about 2 episodes in the history when it was very heavily bombarded. We have evidence preserved on the surface, a lot of craters. And one in particular, very large, the largest impact crater on our solar system, found on the Mercury. We call it Caloris Basin, 1,500 kilometers in diameter. I told you this Mercury is very dense and small. Scientists find the evidence of this collision across the planet on the other side of the impact. Call it antipode, where the ground is very uneven and is fully grooved and have a lot of hills. Scientists suggested when it's crashed the impact, the wave of energy comes through whole the planet, very dense planet as I said, creating those grooves on the other side. Today we have quite a lot of pictures of Mercury's surface. We can look at its geology, and even modern technologies can show us the images of different materials, like on these images, showing the composition of the surface. Interesting that some scientists suggested after the MESSENGER did research that in deep craters which located towards the poles, you can see it in yellow on this image, the temperature there is very low. It's never coming higher than minus 150 to 100 degrees. Because the craters are very deep and they're located close to the poles, the sun rays never reach the bottom of those craters. And some scientists suggested that solidified water must be there. To confirm all that and also study more information about the magnetosphere of the Mercury, we're waiting for BepiColombo satellite to arrive towards the Mercury orbit, which planned to happen in October of 2025. It was sent there in 2018, and with the modern technology equipment on its board, it will give us more information about composition, chemical composition, rocks on its planet. We have better images, and we have more information about its magnetosphere and this very weak and yet fluctuated atmosphere, which we call exosphere. Looking forward for these results to learn more about this little planet, the survivor in such extreme conditions.